Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. To all of you chaplain interns, I hope you are doing well these days, and I'm happy to be back with you on video all the way from the state of Illinois in the United States of America. I want to talk about a topic tonight that is actually very maybe sensitive or difficult to actually understand, and difficult and challenging to give pastoral care to patients and clients of counseling. So I'm going to do my best in a short time period to give you some skills or understanding that might help you. So when I talk about substance abuse, I will also refer to it as an alcoholic or drug addict, because often substance abuse, it turns into addictive behavior. And so addiction is actually a disease. And so it's a physiological disease with mental and emotional effects on the person and the body, and then out into families, relationships, society. So it's a very complicated disease, and I don't think a long time ago that it was really professionally considered a physical disease, but the addiction to drugs and alcohol is real, and therefore the body continues to crave it after a certain period of time because it is used to it and addicted to it. But I want to talk about the person that is abusing substances, and I want you to get a better understanding of why that process happens. Because as a chaplain or a counselor, it's easy to feel helpless or inadequate because of these deeply embedded traits and dynamics and emotions in the person that we are working with or giving pastoral care to. So let me start off by saying that often a basic characteristic of a substance abuser is denial. They deny within themselves that they are abusing, and this self-deception then helps that person negate their own self-responsibility for doing anything about the problem, for taking responsibility to get better. So denial and self-deception are the start of someone that needs to get help and have recovery, or needs even spiritual help, which we as chaplains can give. Also, another thing to understand about substance abusers is that in order for them to get help or stay sober, Most addicts need some type of ongoing accountability or program of recovery, and a state of constant vigilance. That person needs to be aware, self-aware of what's going on inside, and very vigilant to outside stressors, and people. So recovery is one way that chaplains can help patients or counselees with substance abuse, in terms of encouraging them to not be afraid to look at themselves, and the problem of why they are abusing. And a good resource for ongoing recovery is Alcohol Anonymous, or Al-Anon for families of alcoholics, and their 12-step spiritual recovery program. Because with addictions, there's always usually some periods of relapse, and it's a normal part of the disease, just like in any other medical disease. If someone has diabetes and they don't take their insulin, or they don't eat the right foods, they can relapse and the diabetes can get worse. So the substance abuser can relapse. And you might have heard this expression before, but once a person has become an alcoholic, let's say, that person will always be a recovering alcoholic. So they admit and take responsibility that relapses can occur, but they are recovering, and so they're actively getting the help that they need, the support, the accountability, and certainly group therapy, but also individual therapy would be part of that recovery for substance abuse and addiction. Many different stressors can trigger a person that is in recovery to relapse. So we can be aware of that when we are talking with someone that has relapsed, and knowing that relapses are a normal part of the disease, and knowing how to not judge or condemn that person, but to help them accept that they can get back on their feet and back to recovering again. We also have an opportunity to encourage, teach, direct, talk about turning to God for help. That God is the one person that can love truly, unconditionally, and will meet that person where they're at. And God is the one who has the power to help that person sustain or recover their abuse. I don't know if I said that right or not. Help a person to avoid the temptation to use alcohol or drugs again. And so we can be their caring listener as they process their journey and as they talk about their needs. We can tell them about who God is and His mercy and what the meaning of grace is and forgiveness, and that everyone can have a new start, a new beginning, even daily. And I think the 12-step program emphasizes that. And so helping that person turn to God at all cost for strength, for help, for patience, for comfort, for peace. And that is probably the number one way that we as chaplains can help, by listening and by encouraging and talking about God and talking about the power of God to help someone in this type of situation. I've sent some handouts for you to have, and maybe one of these days I'll have enough time to really work on a PowerPoint for this video. But meanwhile, I keep sending documents to Pastor Nato. But this one shows the cycle, and if I hold it up, you'll be able to see it. If you find it in your attachments on your email that Pastor Nacho sends out. But usually there is an initial or beginning awareness in that person that they have a defect. They are a failure. They're not worthy. They're not valuable. They have no purpose. And then that leads to shame, the feeling of shame, and a desire to run from that, to escape that feeling. And usually the escape is through drugs or alcohol. It's all part of the denial, the escape from not being able to deal with the issues that are deep inside or all around them externally. And so it goes on to show the cycle of how it just spirals and spirals and spirals. And then there is, I've also got these, and these are technical. This one is about, oops, have it upside down, sorry. This one is about the disease of alcoholism, and it's very interesting. It's got a lot of detail. You can't see it in the camera here, but you start on the left side and you go down the curve and you read the progression of the disease, and out from this curve line are detailed facts. And then if you go up the curve, that shows how recovery happens, and how call for help and the need for help. So read those things. If you have any questions about them, you can text me, email me, or we can talk about it the next session that I do a video. This is such a deep subject. There's so much information to cover, so I'm just touching the very basic foundations to give some understanding. And then this one is the progression of narcotics dependency and recovery. Now, this one is more of narcotics, which is opiates and barbiturates and things like that. Marijuana, weed would not be under narcotics, but certainly abusing marijuana can lead to other drugs. So can be a gateway. But this will kind of give you a description or understanding the progression that drugs takes, and this one is alcoholism. So I think it's helpful to have some background, some deeper understanding of what is it like for that person that you're talking to or trying to support and help. What are the layers that go down, down, down deep, and the other causes externally that facilitate that. So what happens if a person that is a drug or alcohol abuser doesn't get some help? Then they will isolate themselves, they will withdraw, and they will do more and more to escape the emotional, mental pain, and also the need for physically for the drug, alcohol, other narcotic drugs, etc. Because the body after a while starts actually craving those. So sometimes it's hard for us as Christians not to judge a person. It's like, well, can't you stop? You know it's hurting you, it's hurting your family, your work. You know, can't you do something about it? And I would imagine in your group identity culture, it has its own implications because family identity is so important, and the group as a whole. And so that person that is an abuser, substance abuser, then is a reflection on the whole group. And so you've got shame upon shame upon shame upon shame. And shame and guilt go hand in hand. So I've got another piece of paper or a document that is the guidelines for the treatment of shame. And these are very important to look at, to read, and I think they will be helpful. I will not take the time to go over them on this video, but please read these papers, these documents, and we can talk about them, or you can talk about them in your group processing. And so as we end, I want to direct you to the document that has theological issues dealing with shame. Theological issues dealing with shame. And the first one is accepting our finiteness, our finitude. We do have limitations, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, even sometimes limitations. And shame-based persons try to exceed their human limits in order to get better or prove themselves worthy and valuable. So they're not accepting of who they are, how they're made in God's image, and the worth that He has given them. So the second theological issue would be helping a person to find their identity in God. How do they do that? It's through the Bible, God's revelation of who He is, His nature, and experiencing or encountering God in a personal way. The third one is grace is offered to us, a very important theological term, grace, because that is God's nature, to give mercy and grace, which is a sign of acceptance. And shame-based persons need that encounter with a person who will show grace and unconditional acceptance. They need to experience a church that is a community of grace and not judgment and condemnation. The fourth one is justification. Shame-based people either A, defend themselves, very defensive. When you feel shame and guilt, you want to be defensive. So a patient or a counselee can sometimes show anger or sadness or fear or shame, inadequacy, and they can become defensive. Or B, shame-based persons can transfer their pain to others. So transference, projecting onto others. But with God, it's completely different. God sees us as valued and worthy and priceless. So in comparison to the shame-based person who feels unloved and unworthy, once they encounter God's love, unconditional love, it changes them, and they keep growing in that grace. And then number 5, the cross as God's shame-bearing symbol. The cross is the symbol of all suffering and shame. But we know what happens after the cross comes the beautiful redemption and new life and no longer shame. And then number 6, the community of faith. There's a deep need for all of us to be connected and to be accepted and to feel like we belong. And so in a church or even a group process, small group or counseling group, if there is trust, there is a connectedness and a feeling of acceptance by others, and especially the community of faith, the church, the body of Christ. So the 7th one is the community as a healing bridge. The church can be a healing bridge for people within the church, and as you bring people outside into the church, but even in hospitals or clinics we as ministers, as lay people, as chaplains, as counselors, can help be that bridge and bring that person into the presence of God and be a healing bridge. And then when a shamed-based person or guilt-ridden person who uses drugs and alcohol to escape, when they finally find the peace of God and the peace that they receive through you as a chaplain or a pastoral caregiver, they receive peace and joy, and they can then embrace it as a gift, and they know that it affects them inside. So those are the ways that we can minister, but we also have to remember that we are not responsible for changing someone. We are powerless to change others, and that's something that we have to learn and remember. We want to be God's messengers. We want to be God's helping healers. We want to be His servant, His embodiment of love and forgiveness and grace. But each person has to decide for themselves if they want that, and if they're willing to go down the road of recovery and get the help that they need. And it's hard. It's very hard. I have alcoholism in my family, and on Pastor Flint's side of the family, it touches almost every family in some generation, alcoholism. And I think it's not in one social class. It's in the rich and the poor. It is a problem that is deep in society. And drugs are everywhere in every country. And so people start using, and then it causes mental, emotional, behavioral problems, and it's a vicious cycle. But we cannot stop that or make a person change. We are powerless. In fact, the reason why the only help just about is from God, along with the accountability and support of professional resources and people, is that the substance abuser is also powerless to stop the cycle by themselves. So they have to have God. They have to turn to God over and over and over again. So we are in the role, or have the opportunity, to help gently and lovingly and caringly share that with our patients, our counselees. And honestly, I've had a lot of patients in the hospital where I work that through these last 2 years of COVID, and now in our country there is very high inflation, and just a lot of problems. And so we have seen many patients overdose or try to kill themselves, suicide attempts or thoughts, and many alcoholics that come into the ER that are having seizures or out of their head, are withdrawing from alcohol, over intoxicated. And so I share with you honestly that sometimes I don't know where to begin once they get out, once they've had a chance to detox, or if they're in the ICU and they come off of the respirator, to even have a chance to talk with them, and or to go deeper in a conversation. And that's hard. So I think the main thing we can do is just be there with them, for them, as God would, and keep telling them to turn to God, to depend on Him, to call out to Him for help. And we, as chaplains, ask God for help. Diba? Yes, amen. Okay, I hope you have a good rest of your week, and God bless you, and God bless your ministry. Bye for now.